Welcome back to the Magnolia Media Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan M. Ruggiero, and today we're talking about the Democratic National Convention, night number 3. Tonight, the single speech I am looking forward to the most will be by William Jefferson Clinton. Bill Clinton is perhaps the finest public speaker in the English language alive today. And that has been true since roughly 1990. The man can carry the torch for 45 minutes while keeping an audience enraptured. And not a lot of people who make their money talking for a living would admit that. But this is a man who sort of started the wave of former presidents, senators, and congresspeople going to Silicon Valley firms or major banks and giving speeches for $100 or $200 or $300,000 per hour plus first-rate accommodations. Bill Clinton set a record at the time for the largest amount of money ever paid to a person to write a book. $14 million just to write My Life by Bill Clinton. You'll have to struggle alongside me as you listen to today's podcast, as I am suffering from this dramatic change in weather here in East Tennessee. Just 3 days ago, it was 90 degrees. And this morning, in order to go out on my porch and enjoy my coffee, it required a hoodie, which is very uncommon for Tennessee this time of year. It's common in Pennsylvania, where I've lived in the past and where I'm intending to live in the future. But at any rate, that's where the congestion, that's where the sore throat is coming from. A little trip back to my past. In 1996, 12 years old, I was in my little brother's bedroom. My father, who had been a career salesman and a sales trainer, meaning he trained other sales managers, came into my little brother's room where we were playing PlayStation, Nintendo, whatever. The door swung open. He said, "Boys, into the living room." He never had a polite way of saying much of anything. So we followed him into the living room, and there on his big screen TV was a debate getting ready to happen between then President William Jefferson Clinton and Senator Bob Dole. He told us then that one of these days you'll have to sell for a living. In fact, what I'm doing today by presenting this podcast to the world is actually a form of sales. It's speaking to the public and doing it with confidence. And he wanted us to see how it's done by the absolute best. Instead of putting on presentations himself or bringing us to seminars, he had us watch an hour of Bill Clinton. And in that hour, I learned a lot. I sat enraptured by this man's ability to hit point after point after point while remaining entertaining to the audience at large. It's one of the memories I go to when people ask me, when did you form your political identity? And I often say that night. That fall night, late summer night in 1996, I learned what a once-in-a-generation politician looks like. And I'll say this, no disrespect to the Obamas, Barack or Michelle. They are both wonderful public speakers. They have lovely delivery. Obama stutters around a little bit, and we sort of make fun of his pauses, much like my own. But he is an 85 out of 100, maybe an 80. Michelle, she's a 75 out of 100. Not that she gives a damn either way. She wants nothing to do with the political process, despite the prosperity it has brought her family. It has also brought her family a lot of danger, a lot of personal threats, a lot of slurs, a lot of racial epithets. So, discounting Michelle Obama's feelings about the whole thing, she's 25 points away on a scale of 100 from being anything close to Bill Clinton. In fact, I'd give Bill extra credit and call him a 105 out of 100. This man is an exceptional public speaker, and in 2000, if Al Gore had used Bill Clinton in the right places, especially in the Southeast, especially in those states Democrats didn't used to win, 2000 would have been a blowout. Florida wouldn't have mattered because 270 would have already been established by Al Gore. Instead, Al Gore thought, well, the allegations, the sexual misconduct with Monica Lewinsky, that was all water under the bridge. No one cared. No one cared about Monica Lewinsky at that point. I remember my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, who raised me, saying, I can't believe I still support a man who came on TV and said, I did not have sexual relations with that woman. Then 9 days later came on TV again and said, actually, I lied and I apologize to the American people. There was something in his honesty and in his lack of honesty that gave people some sense of confidence that if this man messes up, he will address the American people, and he, will admit he was wrong. That's something we rarely see from politicians today. Another little secret about the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, or the RNC, the Republican National Convention, is it's just a convention. It's no different than a convention for the vacuum cleaner salesman of America or salespeople of America. It's no different than an automobile convention for best dealership in North America. There's no real difference other than we know those people taking the stage. Well, most of us do. Some of them are a little outside the mainstream, like the Attorney General of the state of Michigan. Not 100% sure who that is, and at least I wasn't before seeing bits and pieces of it in the background as I record this. And of course the convention is going a little late on the East Coast because they're recording in Central Time. It's all happening live in Central Time, and there's a big difference between 11 p.m. Central Time for working people who have to wake up at 6, get the kids ready for school, try to get a spot of breakfast, then take off for an 8-hour day at the office, a 9-hour day at the office, and depending on their commute, it could be up to an hour just to get there, so they may need to leave the house at 7:30. That's a hectic schedule to ask people to stay awake until 1 o'clock in the morning listening to a speech from a politician who hasn't served in 23 years. So, I will say this. Take the opportunity when you have time and listen to whatever speech, whatever angle Bill Clinton decides to take in his speech this evening, because it will be the speech of the convention as it always is. Moving forward, now that Kamala Harris has taken a solid lead in all of the blue wall states, including Arizona, Nevada, She's 2 points ahead within the margin of error in North Carolina, 1 point ahead in Georgia, and now threatening Texas, Florida, and Missouri. Yes, Missouri. We have to remember Missouri was a Democratic-controlled state, with the exception of the state legislature. Every statewide elected official in the state of Missouri was a Democrat as of 2018. And marathon winner Josh Hawley, the man who ran the fastest from the January 6th insurrection, only to come back and try to whitewash it with his racist anger a couple of years later, because he had to bend a knee to his Führer, his demagogue, his God King, Donald Trump. Which the biggest thing that could come out of this election, that could come out of a Kamala Harris and Tim Walz victory, is perhaps the end of Donald Trump. Maybe not the end of Trumpism, but the end of all this allegiance being paid to one sick son of a bitch. To one raging asshole who, by the way, attacks Kamala Harris for her laugh. But has anyone ever seen Donald Trump laugh? Has anyone ever heard his laugh? We've seen him crack a very crooked, almost evil smile, like the bad guy in a, I don't know, Disney movie. That decrepit face of his, ready to cave in from filler and spray paint Rust-Oleum number 45. But we've never actually heard him laugh out loud. We've never seen him that excited, that pleased by anything. Perhaps that has something to do with his childhood. Seems to me he would have laughed his ass off the day he inherited that $440 million and then cried himself to sleep the night he lost it all on Trump Taj Mahal, which everyone told him not to build because he would only be competing with himself in a town where he owned 4 or 5 other casinos, Atlantic City. And Atlantic City is not Las Vegas. It's a small town with just a couple of thousand permanent residents who work in the casinos there. It's also not exactly the cleanest town in America. No offense, New Jersey. No offense, Atlantic City. Atlantic City has hosted some of the great boxing matches in the history of the sport. I, myself, being a boxing fan, I have to be very careful of the toxic masculinity that will get mixed in when I'm watching reels or videos because I'm a boxing or an NBA fan. You have to be very careful. You might stumble across that ridiculous man, Jordan Peterson, that vile scumbag of a human being. Or Joe Rogan, another vile scumbag of a human being who is more than happy to platform people who knife bear cubs to death like Bobby Kennedy Jr. Or, worse yet, rapist Andrew Tate. Yes, rapist Andrew Tate. Moving from spot to spot to, I don't know, flee prosecution. I really need to read up on what exactly is happening with him. As we know he tried to flee Romania to avoid charges, but is apparently still around in some capacity. I don't completely understand it, but I expect it to happen to all of them. I wouldn't be surprised if there are skeletons so dark that Jordan Peterson has buried them in the very, very back of his closet. And Jordan Peterson was around in the days of Christopher Hitchens, who died in 2012, 12 years ago, and was ripped to shreds. Please search on YouTube Christopher Hitchens and Jordan Peterson, and you will see a true intellect, a man of true intellectual magnificence, versus a man who has pieced together a misogynistic, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic Islamophobic message that makes no sense whatsoever, that is not grounded in fact at all, although he'll throw facts out there counting on his audience not being all that smart or hip to what he's doing. And it takes a brain like the one possessed by the late great Christopher Hitchens to call him out on every word of his bullshit. So, remember this about conventions. Conventions are just conventions. There's no difference, again, between the best vacuum salesman or salesperson of the year and nominating a presidential candidate, although one matters a whole hell of a lot more. So I'm a little bit agnostic on it. Plus, again, it's happening late and I'm an early bird because I'm an old man, so I sort of miss it. I miss big pieces of it anyway. Not to mention I'm often taking notes at that time in the evening, trying to bring you this podcast on a regular basis, which we hope you'll support by following, by subscribing, by leaving comments, by rating and reviewing. We appreciate you so much because you can get this podcast anywhere you get your fine podcasts. You can also check us out on Patreon for $5. We get 500 people on Patreon. You'll receive a newsletter from me, written by me, not by Miss Brown, not by one of our other employees here at RHR Productions, the Magnolia Media Podcast, but by me personally on Fridays for you to review, because we bring you an aggregate of the news so you don't have to follow the Times, the Post, the wicked Wall Street Journal, the LA Times, the Chicago Sun-Times, etc., etc., MSNBC, NBC, CBS, all day long, to bring you an aggregate of what's happening. And also Review 538 to look inside the numbers and see what's happening, like Kamala Harris's incredible lead among women. And of course, there are more women in the United States than there are men. Women are far more likely to vote than men. And it seems that men who have had their brains taken out of their skull and twisted so that all the common sense dripped away like the water in a hand towel and then reinstalled in their skull while they're sleeping, so that only 40% of men, 44% of men support Kamala Harris or Democrats in general, while some obscene number of women support Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. And I think that says a lot about the choice of Tim Walz, as much as it says a lot about the choice of the very, very creepy J.V. Vance, or whatever the hell his name is this week. The couch-loving, dolphin-loving, woman-hating, and that includes his own wife, who he has yet to defend when the racial slurs about Indian Americans start flying around, who hates his own children because they're biracial, half Indian and half, I don't know, pretend hillbilly. I mean, the man who wears as much eyeliner as Prince, prancing around stage, pretending he's some sort of ultra-masculine man, that he is the child of Hulk Hogan. Terry Bollea, a man forced to play the character of Hulk Hogan every day for the last 50 years because Hulk Hogan really matters. It's 1983, Donald, so why not have Hulk Hogan come out and introduce you? It's 1983! No, it's 2024. No one cares, including the WWE, about what happens to Terry Bollea, a.k.a. Hulk Hogan. I mean, hell, half the people he wrestled with are dead. The only reason he's alive is because he had enough money to get stem cells injected, to have every type of procedure known to man, to pop pills as if they were Tic Tacs, to snort coke, to smoke himself silly, which you want to smoke weed, fine. But when other wrestlers started calling out what was in that fanny pack, from vials of steroids and growth hormones and insulin to help muscles grow, to cocaine, painkillers, and marijuana, it suddenly disappeared. It suddenly just went away. And look at the lives he ruined along the way. The people who got strung out because the first time they were given a bump of coke, the first time they snorted an Oxycontin, came from the fanny pack of Terry Bollea, a.k.a. Hulk Hogan. And that's just a fact. You don't have to love it. You can hate that fact. But it doesn't change the fact itself. In fact, one might say that Terry Bollea, again, a.k.a. Hulk Hogan, is as big a con man as the person he's promoting for President of the United States. The man who claims to know nothing about Project 2025, despite the fact 200 of his former staffers, including his vice presidential candidate, his running mate, wrote the foreword for the book, and 200 former staffers worked on Project 2025, which is a blueprint for remaking America and the vision of Christo-fascism. White supremacy-based Christo-fascism. It's not like black people and the black church is going to be invited on this journey into a dystopian future if he were to win. And keep in mind, we are in fact underdogs. We are underdogs simply because we have a woman of color atop the ticket. So no matter what poll numbers say, no matter where you live, red state, blue state, get out and vote. Tell a friend, bring a friend with you, bring family members with you. Drive home these points that America is literally on the line. Their way of life and what they consider comfortable is on the line. And if they don't take the opportunity to get out and vote now, and they say, well, our vote doesn't count. No, it doesn't. Not one vote, but 2 or 3 votes per district is the only thing that stopped Donald Trump from becoming president again in 2020. I think it came out to 2 votes per district in a state like Wisconsin or in a state like Arizona, where the total was like 9,800, or, of course, in Georgia, where it was 11,780, because that's what Trump asked Brad Raffensperger to find him, 11,780 votes. Then it's going to get dark. No matter who wins or loses, this is going to be a dark period of time between November 5th and January 20th, when Magadonians try everything they can to correct what they see as a rigged election, because Donald Trump's already going around calling it a rigged election. Well, maybe, just maybe, they'll grow some common sense wherever common sense grows inside the brain, and understand that this man cost them 2018. He cost them any off-year elections in 2019. He cost them 2020. He cost them off-year elections in 2021, with the exception of Glenn Youngkin in Virginia, who will be gone next year, thank God. Who cost them 2022, which should have been a red wave. Instead, it was not even a red ripple. In fact, we added another Democratic senator. Mehmet Oz, Dr. Oz, was unable to convince the American public that things were so expensive when you go to the grocery store for a tray of crudité, a veggie tray, and instead of buying a veggie tray, you bought a whole head of broccoli, an entire bag of carrots that need washed and shaved and cut down. I mean, the insanity of this man who doesn't even live in the state was humiliating. And then to only win the House by 6 seats. 6 seats, most of them in New York, 4 of them. Those seats will bounce back to Democrats. And then we have an extra seat in North Carolina, an extra seat in Louisiana, an extra seat here and there. Democrats will probably take the House with this type of momentum by 20 plus seats if we vote as if we're losing. Vote, vote, vote. That's the message of this podcast today. Again, if you want to support our work, please check us out on patreon.com/the Magnolia Media Network. It's $5. $5, half of what I pay for a Starbucks. Half of what you pay for a Starbucks. $5. Also, check us out on Instagram at Magnolia John 2024. That's my Instagram. That's where I do my lives. When you're on Instagram, look for that Magnolia John is going live. Well, that's me. Which when we pick our movie of the night, which we're not doing this week because of the DNC, we'll pick back up on it probably Friday night. Although Friday night sounds like a good time to go out and actually see a movie in person. Nice, cool theater. Maybe. We'll see. Anyway, until then, wishing you all a wonderful evening. Enjoy the DNC. And again, watch that Bill Clinton speech if you get the opportunity. So until next time, from all of us here at the Magnolia Media Podcast, I'm your host, Jonathan M. Ruggiero, saying, be well, won't you?